Hi, I'm Clara McKoy, and this is my journey around the world. I had the crazy experience of traveling to 3 vastly different countries on 3 separate continents and exploring each one. From Minnesota, home sweet home, I headed to first the UK, then to Afghanistan, and finally closed things off by spending some time in the wonderful country of Bolivia. Let's go! Flying out of Minnesota right as New Year festivities were closing down made for an exciting flight, and the anticipation of my arrival in the UK kept me awake throughout the treacherous ride. After touring the country, I decided some highlights were the Manchester Cathedral, the City of Bath, and Giant's Causeway. Towering high above the ground, the Manchester Cathedral has a rich history. After its original construction started in 579, its building process was on and off for many years. The oldest artifact in the cathedral was an angel-carved stone embedded into a wall that remains there now. I loved the cathedral's large open rooms and beautiful architecture. What a sight! Next, I visited the City of Bath. An important staple in the wool industry in the Middle Ages, it was transformed into an elegant town with unique architecture and logical layouts, a perfect example of a new urbanist location. The natural hot springs in the area were used as thermal spas, and architects took advantage of magnificent oolong limestone that can be found in the area to implement into the design. The perfect way to end my stay in the UK was a visit to Giant's Causeway, a glorious and unique venue. Thousands of geometric stacks of basalt laid at my feet and beyond, rising from below the ocean. Legend has it that giants made a pathway to get from Ireland to Scotland with the basalt used as stepping stones. This natural phenomenon brings many curious earth scientists and tourists who love a stunning location like this one. After finishing a great first leg of the trip, I hopped onto my next plane to Afghanistan. I flew out of the UK right on the first day of February, and wowza did the last month fly by. I wondered just what Afghanistan had to offer and was so pumped to find out. Now thinking about it, my favorite destinations were the Blue Mosque, the Minaret and Remains of Jam, and the Wakhan Corridor, although everything was amazing. From the first step into the Blue Mosque, a sort of serenity lay upon me, and I was so intrigued by the amazing design, with blue tiles and high arches. An old Islamic legend explains why the mosque was originally built, but it remains unclear and has a bit of mystery to it, which seems to draw many people there. Taking another look at traditional Islamic architecture, the Minaret of Jam was a sure highlight of my trip. The tower represents how many building styles have evolved over hundreds of years. Built in 829, it is believed the location of the minaret signifies the center of Firuzka, an ancient and sacred town. Adding to the historical feel are messages in Hebrew inscribed into the tower and other geological forms surrounding it. For my next destination, I headed off to rural Afghanistan in the north, ready to backpack through the Wakhan Corridor, a large area in the mountains that formerly was part of the Silk Road. Receiving only about 100 visitors per year, the Wakhan Corridor is an amazing getaway from the other bustling parts of the country, and it's rightly called Roof of the World by locals. I had such an adventurous time there, and I'm sure I'll never forget about my travels in Afghanistan. I couldn't believe I was already on to my last country, but was also starting to feel a little homesick at the same time. I slept hard on the plane, fueling up to make the most of my last month away. I jumped right into the country, and everywhere I traveled, I was impressed more and more with all of the beauty Bolivia had to offer. The most amazing places I visited were El Fuerte Samaipata, La Isla del Sol, and Salar de Uyuni. I was welcomed into El Fuerte de Samaipata by huge rock hills and lots of red sandstone. After taking a closer look at the landscape, I found ancient carvings on many rocks and other geological forms in the area. The traditional Bolivian art was magnificent, and it was so cool to see how native people used buildings in the same vicinity as communal spaces. I enjoyed a boat ride across the gleaming lake Titicaca next, and arrived shortly on the unique island Isla del Sol, or Island of the Sun. The island is about 27 square miles and is home to many old ruins that archaeologists obsess over. The Incas, a native group in Bolivia, believe the sun god was born on the island and worship it for that reason. For my last stop, I headed to the nationally acclaimed marvel, Salar de Uyuni, aka the largest salt flat in the world. Loping across the landscape felt so surreal, and I learned the materials found in the dried out lake basin, lithium and salt, are the same elements that help power things like computers and other electronics. Sometimes, surrounding lakes flood and overflow onto the flat, resulting in an amazingly mystical effect of a mirror on the land. Although the wildlife in this region is scarce, bright pink flamingos can be found on and around the land of Salar del Uyuni. On my travels to the UK, I noticed lots of buzz about a new law that will be put into play in September of 2020, which seems to affect many families and students in the country. The government is expanding and broadening its sex ed curriculum and forcing all schools who are receiving their funding to conform to it. The decision is based on the fact that many leaders in the country want to disintegrate the stigma around sexually related conversations. They agree that children and adolescents need to be well equipped for the world they are growing up in, thus needing the tools and information that will keep them safe, including the ability to learn about the topic through a non-judgmental platform. In Afghanistan, the situation appears in a different way. 68% of adults are illiterate, and the country's school system is much less organized. Many programs have been created that campaign for more responsible conversations about sexual issues in the country, and such are very common in Afghanistan at the moment. One thing that makes this difficult, though, is that society in Afghanistan crowns these types of relationships between parents and kids that involve talking about such topics shameful, and they're looked down upon. The youth clearly disagree, though, and in a recent widespread survey related to sex ed attitudes and behaviors, 90% said more formal sex ed is desperately needed. While the UK is putting lots of effort into updating the old curriculum that hadn't been altered since 2000, Afghan leaders are not doing much, if anything. However, the groups I mentioned earlier are pushing to change the cultural norms and raising awareness countrywide. In the UK, the main argument against the new curriculum is backed up by the Christian community, who disagrees with such topics being discussed in school and want more say about whether kids will be participating. In any event, with a globalized world comes new challenges and disagreements, and this instance is no exception. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude as I remember all of the fun times I had and the things that I learned about different cultures. Thank you for watching, and never stop adventuring!